The story I'm about to tell isn't about a bad dinner. It's about dignity. And it began on a Friday afternoon in Portland, Oregon, as the city was breathing a long, slow sigh of relief. The sunset in Portland has a special kind of beauty, especially after an early rain. The light isn't harsh, it's soft, like honey, pouring over the still damped cobblestone sidewalks of the Pearl District. The air smells of wet earth, eucalyptus, and a hint of smoke from a nearby bakery's chimney. From Burnside Avenue, the sound of car horns blends with the smooth jazz drifting from a corner pub, creating the familiar symphony of the city I call home. I walked, not in a hurry. Every step was a deliberate act. I felt the solidness of my old, worn-in brown leather shoes on the stone. They aren't designer. They aren't the kind of shoes you see in fashion magazines. But they are mine. They are polished every Sunday morning, not to impress, but as a ritual of self-respect. My father used to say, "Son, you may not have a lot of money in your pocket, but never let there be dust on your shoes. How you care for what you have tells the world who you are." I walked past art galleries, old bookstores, and cafes where people sat behind glass panes, their faces illuminated by laptop screens. Portland is a city of masks, a mask of progressivism, of open-mindedness, of Black Lives Matter signs in the windows. But I know better. I've lived long enough to understand that prejudice doesn't always take the form of a flag or a slur. More often, it's subtle. It's a silence that lasts a second too long, a glance that's a little too quick, a door held open for the person in front of you but released just before you arrive. It's a virus in the air, invisible but ever-present. And on that night, I decided to walk directly into the storm. The restaurant, the Hearth and Ember, came into view. It was the crown jewel of the empire I had quietly built over the last 10 years. The hand-forged copper sign glittered in the sunset, reflecting my image, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in a simple white shirt and charcoal-colored trousers. No watch, no jewelry, just a leather messenger bag slung over my shoulder, aged but well cared for. I stood there for a moment, looking at my own reflection. I didn't see a CEO. I didn't see a boss. I saw a man. And tonight, that was enough. In fact, it was everything I wanted them to see. I had acquired the Hearth and Ember restaurant chain 2 months ago. The negotiations were long, complex, conducted over Zoom calls and late-night emails. The old board of directors had never met me in person. They only knew the name Marcus Bennett on the legal documents, a name without a skin color, without a physical form. I had planned it that way. Today was the first time I would set foot in one of my own establishments as a customer, unannounced, no fanfare, a spot check, not on the quality of the food, but on the quality of the humanity. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside.
The air was warm, filled with the smell of burning oak, garlic butter, and the cheerful hum of conversation. Candlelight flickered off crystal glasses. Couples leaned in to whisper to each other. Families gathered around bountiful tables. It was a perfect picture of warmth and elegance, a world designed to make you feel welcome. But that welcome wasn't for everyone. Behind the polished mahogany hostess stand was a young woman. The name tag pinned to her blouse read, "Rachel, Assistant Manager." She was scrolling through an iPad, her lips pursed in concentration. When I approached, she looked up. And then it happened. It wasn't a look, it was a calculation, performed in a nanosecond. Her eyes swept from my shoes, up my non-designer pants, past my simple shirt, and landed on my face. A 1-second pause, a silence just long enough for me to see her brain running the numbers. The variables were entered. Black man, simple clothes, no outward signs of wealth. The equation was solved, and the result appeared on her face. A smile. But it wasn't the warm, genuine smile you give an honored guest. It was a tight-lipped, transactional smile. A controlled smile designed to maintain distance, a professional tool to mask contempt. It said, "I will be polite to you because it is my job, but make no mistake, I know who you are and where you belong." I have seen that smile 100 times in my life. I saw it on the face of the loan officer when I first applied for a business loan. I saw it on the face of the real estate agent when I asked to see a house in a white neighborhood. I saw it on the faces of sales clerks in high-end stores. It is the smile of the gatekeeper, the one who decides who is worthy of entry. "Good evening, sir," her voice chimed, artificially sweet, like a bell with no warmth. "Do you have a reservation?" I just gave a slight nod. One person. My voice was low and even, no apology in it, no explanation. I didn't say, "Sorry to bother you," or "Do you think you could squeeze me in?" I simply stated the fact. One person, present, requesting service. Rachel glanced around the dining room. My eyes followed hers. I saw at least 3 empty tables in prime locations, one by the window overlooking the glittering street, another near the cozy fireplace, but Rachel's eyes seemed to slide right over them. She frowned at her iPad, feigning a busy search, her finger tracing meaningless patterns on the screen. It was a performance, a little show to let me know that finding a spot for me was a favor, an extraordinary effort on her part. She murmured, then looked up as if she had just solved a complex problem. We have something in the back. I hope you don't mind. Not at all, I said, and a faint smile touched my own lips. It was not a smile of gratitude. It was a smile of understanding. I knew exactly what was happening. The test had begun, and I was ready to play. She led the way. We walked past tables draped in crisp white linen, where diners laughed and clinked wine glasses, the sound clear and bright. I could feel the eyes on me, a few quick, curious glances, a few longer, more judgmental stares. A couple at a nearby table stopped talking as I passed, then whispered to each other and chuckled. I didn't need to hear the words, to know their content. My presence here, in this space, was an anomaly, and people often mock what they don't understand or accept. She stopped. We had arrived. It was a small, single, rickety table tucked into the dimmest corner of the restaurant, right next to the hallway that led to the restrooms. The atmosphere here was different. The warmth of the fireplace didn't reach this far. The romantic candlelight was replaced by the pale, sterile light from the corridor, and in the air an unmistakable scent lingered, chemical cleaner. This wasn't a table. This was a message that said, you don't belong here. You can stay, but you will not be a part of us. You will sit on the fringe, in the dark, where your existence doesn't disturb the real guests. Rachel looked at me, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Your table, sir. Thank you, I said, my voice still calm. I didn't complain. I didn't show any irritation. That's exactly what she would have expected. A confrontation would have allowed her to play the victim, to call a manager, to legitimize her actions. But my silence, my calm acceptance, seemed to confuse her. I pulled out the chair, gently, set my leather bag on the floor, sat down, and placed the linen napkin on my lap. Each movement was slow, deliberate. I was not an intruder, trying to act like he belonged. I was a man about to have his dinner. As I opened the menu, I could feel Rachel's eyes still on me. She was waiting for a reaction. When she got none, she shrugged and walked away, probably feeling she had won this silent confrontation. But she was wrong. This wasn't a confrontation. It was an investigation, and it had only just begun. Sitting alone in my dark corner, I had a unique vantage point of the restaurant. I could observe everything without being noticed. I saw the waiters move with practiced grace, their smiles for other tables, genuine smiles. I saw the plates of food being brought out, presented like works of art, steaks garnished with sprigs of rosemary, seared salmon resting on a bed of golden sauce. Around me was a symphony of the mundane, the sound of the restroom door opening and closing, the flush of a toilet. A man in an Armani suit walked past, scowling at me as if my presence was personally ruining his dining experience. I paid it no mind. Instead, I focused on the menu. The names were fancy: prime Wellington with truffle duxels, pan-seared Hokkaido scallops with saffron beurre blanc. But I wasn't looking for a dish. I was looking for something familiar, an anchor. A few minutes later, Rachel returned. This time she wasn't holding a notepad. She stood with her arms crossed, her head tilted, that smirk back on her face. So, she said, her voice unnaturally high as if for comic effect, have we decided on a dish for this special occasion? Special occasion? I asked, looking up directly into her eyes. Oh, I'm just guessing, she said with a flippant shrug. A man all by himself, dressed up, must be celebrating something. Birthday? Promotion? I looked at her, unblinking. I'm just here for dinner. The simplicity of my answer seemed to deflate her. She was expecting a story, an explanation, something she could latch onto and mock. I'll have the grilled salmon, with asparagus and mashed potatoes. And an iced tea, unsweetened. Rachel's eyebrows shot up dramatically. Ooh, living large, are we? That combo is a whole $29. Must be the end of your bonus. Every word was a tiny needle, designed to make me feel small, to remind me that I was playing a part I didn't belong in. My father had faced this too. He was a carpenter, a man with calloused hands and a gentle heart. I remember him taking our family to a fancy restaurant once for his and my mother's anniversary. I saw the way the waiter looked at his hands, the way they spoke down to him as if he were a child. On the way home that night, he told me, Marcus, don't ever let anyone tell you what you're worth. You know your own value. I looked at Rachel, and for a moment I saw all the people who had ever tried to put a price tag on my father, on me, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. Yes, let's just say that, I replied indifferently. Rachel's smile vanished, replaced by a cold expression. Well, I hope you have enough for a decent tip. We don't work for free, you know. She turned and walked away. But as soon as she was just out of my direct line of sight, she pulled out her phone. She made no effort to hide it. I saw her thumb moving quickly across the screen. Then she smiled and hit send. I didn't need to be a mind reader to guess the contents of that text. Something like, got a pathetic guy at table 19 trying to act fancy. It's hilarious. I had given her a chance to stop, a chance to treat me like a human being. She had refused. 15 minutes later, a young, skinny waiter brought out my food. His name tag said Tyler. He avoided my eyes. Here you are, sir, he mumbled, placing the plate on the table in a rush. Enjoy your meal. There was a hesitation in his eyes, a flicker of guilt. He knew something was wrong. He was a cog in the machine, but at least he was aware of what the machine was crushing. Then I looked down at the plate. It was an insult served on porcelain. The salmon was overcooked, dry and tough. One corner of it was completely burnt, charred black. The asparagus spears were limp and discolored, looking like they'd been boiled since morning. And the mashed potatoes? My God, they weren't elegantly piped, but slopped on the plate like leftovers in a school cafeteria. There was no decorative sprig of parsley, not a single drop of sauce. It was nothing like the plates of salmon I had seen delivered to other tables. They weren't even trying to hide their contempt. They were serving it to me. I took a deep breath. Anger began to rise in my chest, hot and bitter. I wanted to stand up, flip this table, and scream at them. I wanted to drag them into the middle of the dining room and show everyone what they had done. But then my father's voice echoed in my mind. Silence has its own power, son. Let them reveal themselves. So I did the last thing they expected. I picked up my fork and knife. I cut a piece of the fish. It was so dry it nearly crumbled under the blade. I brought it to my mouth and chewed, slowly. It tasted of disappointment. It was dry. It was cold, and it was full of the taste of contempt. Just then, Rachel returned, like a vulture circling its prey. She leaned against a nearby wall, arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. "How is it?" she asked, her tone dripping with challenge. "I'm sure it's to your liking, right?" I slowly placed my fork and knife down. I looked up, and for the first time that evening, I met her gaze with an unmasked intensity. "This salmon," I said, my voice low and clear. "Is it normally served in this condition?" My direct question seemed to catch her off guard. She gave a short, dismissive laugh, an attempt to cover her momentary confusion. "For our regular guests, no. But for people like you, yeah, I'd say that's about right." "People like me," I repeated, my tone still dangerously calm. "Could you clarify that for me? What kind of people are people like me?" My quiet persistence had cornered her. She had walked right into the trap she set for me. She realized it, and a flicker of panic crossed her face before it was covered by a defensive layer of arrogance. "Oh, come on. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean." "No, I don't," I said. "That's why I'm asking. I am a customer. I ordered an item from your menu, and I received this. I simply want to know why." "Look," she said, her voice becoming sharp, "if you have a problem, you can leave. Or you can ask for the manager." "Oh, that's right, Luis. The main manager isn't here tonight. What a shame, isn't it?" She thought it was the final blow. She had removed all my options. Complaining was useless. Confrontation would only make me look like the troublemaker. For the first time all evening, my jaw tightened. Not in anger, but in the compression of a final decision being made. "I understand," I said. The words were as light as the wind, but as sharp as a razor. "Understand what?" she sneered. "I understand that someone is deliberately testing to see where my breaking point is." Rachel hesitated for a second. Then she let out a loud, fake laugh, drawing the attention of a few nearby tables. "You're hilarious! A breaking point? Who do you think you are?" I didn't answer. I just nodded. I saw the young waiter, Tyler, still standing in a far corner, watching us furtively. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before I saw the shame and helplessness in his gaze. And then I stood up. The act of my standing up seemed to startle Rachel. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" she called out, her tone possessive, as if I were a prisoner trying to escape. I didn't turn around immediately. I calmly took out my phone and glanced at the time. I made a mental note. Then I turned my head. The restroom. A wicked smile spread across Rachel's face. This was her moment, her chance to deliver the final humiliation. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, her voice as sweet as honey and as venomous as a snake. "The main restroom is reserved for guests with a minimum expenditure of $50. The restaurant seemed to fall silent. Even the whispers stopped. This was too blatant, too absurd. I blinked once. I don't recall seeing that policy printed on the menu. "It's not the kind of thing we need to print," Rachel said, with a shrug, reveling in her moment of power. "It's an internal policy to ensure a premium experience for our real guests." She emphasized the words premium and real, her eyes locked on mine. The message couldn't have been clearer. A long beat of silence. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me. They were waiting to see what I would do. Would I explode? Would I argue? Would I walk away in shame? I did the one thing none of them expected. I nodded. "All right. Is there another option?" My calmness confused her again. She was expecting a fight, but I gave her compliance. It took her a moment to regroup. Yes," she said, pointing toward a dim door at the end of the hall. "If you want, you can use the restroom in the basement. It's next to the janitorial area." The basement. For the staff. For the garbage. For people like me. That was it. The final piece of evidence. The perfect humiliation. "Fine," I said. And I walked, not toward the exit, but toward the stairs leading to the basement. Every step I took was steady. I was not walking down in defeat. I was walking down to collect the final exhibit in the case I was building. As I passed Rachel, I could see the surprise and a hint of disappointment on her face. Her little drama didn't get the climax she wanted. The oppressed didn't scream. No one in the restaurant realized it, but that was the moment the tide began to turn. No one knew. I wasn't just walking down to a basement. I was walking towards a truth, a reminder to this entire system that dignity cannot be priced by a look, a tone of voice, or an imaginary internal policy. Because when you are denied your humanity, you don't argue, you reclaim it, and I was fully prepared. The wooden stairs creaked under my feet. The air grew colder, damper. The smell of oak and food was replaced by the smell of mildew and bleach. This was the belly of the beast, where the ugly things were hidden away from the fine diners upstairs. The basement restroom was a small, cramped room. A single, pale yellow bulb hummed weakly from the ceiling. Water dripped steadily from an old copper pipe into a drain on the cement floor. There was a small, stained mirror hanging over the sink. I looked in the mirror. The face that looked back at me was not the face of an angry man. It was not the face of a victim. It was the face of a warrior. A face so accustomed to injustice that it could read it like a textbook. I saw in it the image of my father, my grandfather, and the countless others who came before me who had to swallow their pride and keep walking. But I also saw something else in those eyes. A fire, an iron resolve. 3 words echoed in my mind as clear and powerful as a church bell. Enough is enough. I didn't use the restroom. I just went to the sink. I turned on the cold water, which came out in a weak stream. I washed my hands, not to clean them, but as a ritual to wash away the humiliation they had tried to heap upon me. I dried them on a rough, scratchy paper towel. Then I looked at my reflection one more time, and I nodded. It was time. I walked back up the stairs, each step light but full of weight. When I pushed the door open and stepped back into the main dining room, a strange silence fell. And then I saw it. My table was gone. Not just cleared, it was gone. The chair I sat in, the small rickety table, there was no trace that I had ever been there. The plate of burnt salmon I hadn't finished, the glass of iced tea I hadn't touched, all of it had vanished, as if it had never existed. As if I had never existed. It was the final act of erasure. They hadn't just treated me badly, they had tried to delete my presence. I stood there in the middle of the aisle. The feeling wasn't shock, it was a cold, piercing clarity, like looking at a complex equation, and suddenly the answer appears, perfectly formed. A waiter mopping a nearby table looked up and startled when he saw me. "Oh, you're back. I thought someone said you had left." "I went to the restroom," I said, my voice low, each word landing like a stone in a still pond. "For 4 minutes. I was gone for 4 minutes."
Just then, Rachel appeared from behind the hostess stand. She had been waiting for this. This was the final act of her play, the one where she got to be the responsible manager dealing with a troublesome person. "Oh, there you are," she announced, her voice full of fake surprise. "We thought you had dined and dashed. Such a nuisance. The table has already been cleared for the next guest." She was lying, brazenly, in front of everyone. I didn't move. "You saw me go to the restroom. You told me to go to the restroom. You knew perfectly well I had not left." Rachel shrugged, holding her hands out as if she were completely innocent. "I'm sorry, I can't keep track of every customer's movements. If a guest leaves their table for an extended period, we assume they have left. It's protocol." I stared at her. A long silence. I could feel the tension in the air. The diners had stopped eating, the waiters had stopped moving. Everyone was watching. And then, as if all the silence, all the restraint, all the observation from the entire evening was compressed into a single action, I slowly reached into my leather bag. I pulled out a thin black portfolio. I opened it, and I withdrew a single piece of paper. I took that paper, walked right up to Rachel, and held it out. My voice when I spoke was not loud, but it echoed in the silent room. "Then allow me to remind you of a few things. This is the official contract of ownership for the Hearth and Ember restaurant chain. My name is Marcus Bennett. I am the man who acquired this entire company 2 months ago. And tonight, I did not come here as your boss. I came here as a customer, an ordinary black man who wanted to have dinner. And you have shown me exactly how such a man is treated in my establishment." The air in the restaurant turned to ice. You could have heard a pin drop. A young man in the corner, the one who had been watching me, slowly raised his phone and started recording. He made no attempt to hide it. Rachel's mouth fell open. Her face went from pink to a pasty white. Her hand trembled as she took the paper from me. Her eyes darted frantically over the text, the corporate seal, the lawyer's signatures. And then the paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor as if it had turned to hot ash. She stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "I didn't know. Why didn't you say something at the beginning?" I raised an eyebrow. The question was ludicrous. "Say what? Say that I was wealthy, so you should respect me? Say that I was the boss, so you weren't allowed to humiliate me? Say that I had power, so I deserved to be treated like a human being?" I took a step back, and my gaze widened to include everyone in the room, the diners, the staff, the silent witnesses. I didn't need to be intentionally insulting. You did it naturally, with every single small detail, with the first glance, with the sarcastic tone, with the decision about my table, with the quality of my food, and of course, with the matter of the restroom. Just then, Lewis rushed out from behind the bar. Someone must have called him. His face was a mask of panic. "What's going on here? Marcus Bennett?" He looked at me, then at the paper on the floor, and recognition dawned in his eyes. Rachel scrambled to his side as if grabbing a life raft. "Lewis, he's making things up. He's setting me up. I was just doing my job. You know me. I would never discriminate against anyone." I didn't look at her anymore. I looked directly at Lewis. "Would you like to see the contract for yourself?" Lewis bent down and picked up the paper. He didn't need to read it closely. He had seen similar documents during the transition. His face went pale as a sheet. "My God, it's real," whispered. "Completely," I confirmed. Lewis turned to Rachel, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "Rachel, there is no policy about a minimum charge for the restroom. You made that up, didn't you?" Rachel stammered, her eyes darting around, searching for a lie, but there were no lies left that could save her. I thought there was this one time someone—" Lewis didn't need to hear any more. He turned back to me, his face a portrait of remorse. "Mr. Bennett, I am so sorry. On behalf of the entire restaurant, I'm not here for a personal apology, Lewis. I'm here to make sure that no other guest, no matter what they look like, what they wear, or where they come from, ever has to experience what I experienced tonight. No, it's not fair, Rachel suddenly screamed, her desperation turning to indignation. He set me up. He came in here and didn't say who he was. I was tricked. I looked at her one last time. No one tricked you, Rachel. I simply existed, and my existence exposed who you really are. You created this entire situation. I just came for dinner, and this time I chose not to be silent. Lewis looked at Rachel, a deep sadness in his eyes. He didn't yell. He just said one sentence, quietly but with absolute finality. Take off your name tag, Rachel. You have to be kidding me. No, Lewis said, his voice now devoid of any hesitation. Right now. Shaking, she unpinned the plastic name tag from her blouse. Her hand trembled so much she almost dropped it. She handed it to Lewis. Her eyes were blank, empty, all the arrogant fire gone. The silence in the restaurant was now of a different quality. It was not the silence of curiosity. It was the silence of contemplation.
As Rachel walked away, no one said a word. Not a whisper. Not a word of defense. She did not leave as a victim. She left as a lesson. In that quiet moment, a small figure approached me. It was Tyler, the young waiter. He hesitated, his eyes on the floor. Mr. Bennett, he whispered. I'm sorry. I saw the plate of fish. I knew it was wrong. I should have said something. I put a hand on his shoulder, a gentle squeeze. Thank you, Tyler. Sometimes knowing something is wrong is the first step. The next step is finding the courage to speak up. You're young. You'll learn. An older woman, whom I had noticed watching the entire affair from her corner table, stood up and walked over. Her eyes were kind, but held a fire. Thank you, she said, her voice warm. My own son has gone through similar things. Not everyone has the strength to endure without breaking, and not everyone has the wisdom to fight so intelligently. I nodded my thanks to her. I looked around the room. The faces looking at me had changed. There was no more judgment or curiosity. There was respect. A respect born from truth, not from power. I don't need your support, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I just need all of us to remember this. The right to be respected doesn't come from your appearance, from the money in your wallet, or from your social status. It is a fundamental human right. It is not something to be given. It is something that must exist. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant. There was no victory declared, no trumpets, no applause. Just a man leaving a restaurant after reclaiming what should never have been taken away in the first place. His dignity. Hey everyone, Marcus here. I know it's a little strange for me to be sitting here in my office talking to you through a camera like this. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm a businessman. An ordinary man who happened to have a very extraordinary night. The video of that night at the Hearth and Ember, filmed by a kind guest, went viral. And I received thousands of emails of messages. People asked me, how did you feel? Why weren't you angry? How did you stay so calm? That's why I decided to tell this story from my own perspective. The truth is, I was angry. That anger was like a furnace burning in my chest. But I learned from my father that fire can be used to provide warmth, or it can be used to burn everything down. Uncontrolled anger burns you first. That night, I chose to use that fire not to destroy, but to illuminate the truth. A lot of people focus on the twist ending, that I was the owner. But to me, that's the least important detail. The important part is what happened before they knew who I was. Because for almost an hour, I wasn't a CEO. I was a test case, a proxy for every person who has ever been judged by their cover, who has been quietly mistreated. The Hearth and Ember has changed. Luis and I worked together. We rebuilt the team from the ground up. Tyler, the young waiter, is a shift manager now. We've implemented extensive training programs on empathy and unbiased service. On the wall where that table near the restroom used to be, there's now a small brass plaque. It reads, every guest, every story, every dignity matters. It's not a slogan. It's a promise. As for Rachel, I heard she left Portland. I take no joy in her downfall. I only hope that somewhere she has learned her lesson, because true justice isn't about revenge, it's about growth. My story is just one of millions of similar stories that happen every single day, in restaurants, in offices, in stores, on the street, quiet battles for dignity. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today. What's your story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a subtle discrimination like I did? A look, a word, an action that made you feel small? And if so, how did you choose to react? Were you silent, or did you speak up? There are no wrong answers. We all fight our battles in our own way. But I believe there is power in sharing these stories. It shows us we are not alone. Leave your story in the comments below. I will read every single one, because your story matters. If my story today resonated with you, if it made you think, if it gave you a little bit of strength, please do 3 simple things. Like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel The Quiet Stories, where we believe a voice doesn't have to be loud to be heard. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most powerful act isn't flipping a table. Sometimes it's simply sitting down, folding your napkin, and patiently waiting for the right moment to stand up. Hold on to your dignity and respect the dignity of others. That's how we change the world, one dinner at a time.